So next we have Eunice Burns, and I think many of you probably know Eunice, but for those of you who don't, she is a well-known public figure in Ann Arbor. She has served on the Ann Arbor City Council, on the Planning Commission, which I actually didn't know until I saw your biography, the Downtown Development Authority, and the Huron River Watershed Council. She was one of the co-founders of the Huron River Day. So she has a long, long tradition of public service to this community. She began her career as a teacher, but is probably most well known for her work in the real estate industry. She is a realtor. And she now lives with one of her daughters in an accessory dwelling unit in the off-Broadway neighborhood. So I'll let her tell you where the off-Broadway neighborhood is. Thanks, Eunice.
Well, you've heard a lot about some of the things that I have in my home and some that I don't. But I am going to talk about three-generation homes instead of just two. All of us have certainly been in two-generation homes, either as a child or as a parent. But probably not as many have been fortunate enough to live in a three-generation home. But I'm one of those. When I was growing up, my grandfather lived with us, and I have two vivid memories of that time, although he died when I was 9. The first is when he used to put me in his lap and say a poem, which was, there was a little girl with a curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was horrid. The other is a rite, and that's R-I-T-E, which I don't know how many cultures have it anymore. But when my grandfather died, his casket was in our living room, and neighbors would come in and talk, gossip probably, have some tea or coffee, I suppose. And it was my first brush with death. Now, perhaps we're coming full circle and planning for that third generation with the choice of living with your family in a familiar community setting. For over 20 years, I have been in a three-generation home. Although this year we're back to a two-generation home because Jamie went off to college. We began to plan for the future when I was alone in a bathroom, in a house with 4 bedrooms, bath and a half, 2-car garage, big yard, and my daughter, her husband, and their 3 children were in a 3-bedroom house, 1 bath, no playroom, and a tiny yard. It was my son-in-law who first said, we should live together. It made a great deal of sense. So they sold their house, they bought my house, and with some updates, we lived in what had been my house, which my husband and I had bought in 1960. And Wendy said I should tell you where off-Broadway was. It's near North Campus, near North Campus, right off Broadway. It's a little street called Harbaugh, which has about 12 houses on it, and it's a wonderful neighborhood. And my husband and I bought that house in 1960, and I'm still in it. Now, Lori, my daughter, had been asked to write an article for a university publication about living together. Well, Lori and John's friends sometimes said to her, "You live with your what?" But my friends said, "Oh, you're so lucky." And I am and was. I particularly liked a quote from my 9-year-old grandson at that time. He said, "I like living with my grandmother because instead of going on vacation to see her, I can go on vacation with her." And we did. I often took them in the summer up to the cottage, just the kids and I, and we swam in the waves and we played games and did puzzles, and we also shared jobs. I didn't do all the cooking and dishes, they helped. But I still needed a private space other than my bedroom at the main house. So my youngest daughter, who is an architect, designed an apartment for me across the breezeway in the 2-car garage. While I may tell people that I live in the old garage, there's no old garage feeling at all. I moved into my separate apartment in December 1996. We still have family dinners, or still had family dinners, and we still do once in a while, maybe once a week. We play games together, and I did a lot of carpooling, taking the kids to school and picking them up. And the doors between us are either open or they're certainly not locked. I'm glad I was there when my son-in-law was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he died in 2003. Lori could go to work and not worry because I was there to help and to watch. Since then, Lori has remarried and left. But fortunately, my youngest daughter, the architect, and her husband were in town, and they moved in so I could stay in my space. What are the downsides? Well, I don't know of any from my standpoint. I've learned to like different music. I've even been to the Blind Pig. And I've learned to tolerate the F and S words, even though I had my mouth washed out with soap when I was growing up. But there were obstacles in building, and there will be obstacles if a family member is no longer there. In building, I could not have a real stove. I use a 2-burner hot plate and a microwave convection oven, which is perfectly adequate for me. And I do have the option of going over to the main kitchen and using that if I really need to. So it works fine, but there's no real stove in my apartment. This unit, if a family member is not around to live in it, it cannot be rented at this point. And yet it would be ideal for a nurse, a graduate student, a caretaker. It's within walking distance of the hospital, of both campuses, and of downtown. If we are truly talking about sustainability, we should be sure there are no obstacles in using our resources for the good of all our people. I looked up the definition of, excuse me, of sustainability in the Oxford English Dictionary. There's about 4 pages of definitions there. But they talk about not only sustaining resources and energy, but also sustainability of living in the support of life, to keep a person or community, the mind, spirit, and so forth from failing or giving way. And I think that's terribly important that we remember that. I'm sorry about my voice, but our population in Ann Arbor is aging, as we've heard, and many of us are living longer. And we will not all want to live as I do or to live in a home with only senior citizens. We will need more ways to sustain our mind and spirit. My solution is one that is difficult to realize now. I hope the city takes notice. We need this option. In looking at our housing stock, certainly there are many large houses in single-family neighborhoods. If the owners wish to do so, there should not be obstacles to add an accessory apartment. Most times, the footprint of the house will scarcely be changed, if at all. And the rent from the apartment may be the way that someone can stay in their home longer. Or they could live in the apartment and rent out their house. It would make better use of some of our housing stock, and it's another choice. And choice is a word that I think of a lot, choice in how you can live your later lives. And I guess I would stop with just one bit of advice, is that for everyone, you should start thinking about it, not when you're 80 or 90, but when you're maybe 55, I guess you're considered a senior citizen. But think about, what do you want to do when you grow older? And just examine all the options that are out there. And there are quite a few, but maybe we'll have some more now that you can look at too. So look at your choices before it's time to move in. Thank you.